Was there a French connection with Isaac Gulliver? Did he get pardoned by the king because of all the work he'd done transporting French people backwards and forwards later in his career?
So there are probably people in this audience who are far more knowledgeable about Isaac Gulliver than me. The French connection, I guess, was with the trading. I think the pardoning was, everybody got pardoned with that part, the proclamation of pardoning in 1782 or 5 or whatever it was I said. Yeah. So this other bit, do you know about that? As I don't know about that bit.
I just remember reading it in a book somewhere. And that was definitely later on in his career.
Okay.
And I'm sure the king made mention of it because of all the good work he'd done shipping people across.
It's ringing a vague bell. Anybody else know about the pardon?
Connection with the revolution, the French Revolution.
Right.
Which is about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So I think yes. Yeah, I think eventually, I suppose, with that pardoning, I don't know whether the king was realised that he couldn't get the better of the smugglers, or what.
I think he'd also just lost America as well.
And lost America. It's all much more complicated, isn't it? Yeah. And I think it's one of the things about doing a show like this. It's like, how do I make it into something that is understandable in a whole, without kind of going into all the intricacies, and then it's a bit of an information overload. So yes, I think I did some little bits of reading around that, and I thought I can't bring all of that in, really. Yeah.
Context is huge.
It's really wide, really wide.
Could I just ask something interesting, because I've done an actual PowerPoint PowerPoint presentation on Gulliver, Isaac Gulliver, and you've covered many of the points that I've got in my presentation. But one of the ones that's confused me quite well was regarding when he allegedly died, and the stones were put in the coffin. The coffin was buried at Kinston, as I understand, Kinston Church. That's where it happened. And then he disappeared, and it seemed he disappeared down to Devon. Mm. And Gulliver himself was around about 6'3", if I understand, yes. And it must be quite interesting to find him, if you see what I mean, because he's quite large, as they say. And then he appeared at a later date in Wimborne, as you just said. And that always confused me as to how, at one point he's dead, allegedly, and the second time he just appears in Wimborne, and nobody seems to understand, didn't ask him the question, what happened? How can you just come back and just walk around the town as though nothing's happened at all? And I've never found out how that happened. You don't know either.
I don't know either. I mean, I imagine he was a sort of master of sleight of hand, that he was very used to smoke and mirrors, probably enjoyed perhaps that bit of mystery. Sounds like he did a bit of an Agatha Christie there, really. Yeah.
I mean, he's buried in Wimborne Minster, and we went there about not so long ago. I didn't realise that. It was around about a couple of months ago. And we were talking to one of the people who were showing people around the church. And I asked where he was buried. And he looked down and he said, underneath what you're standing on at the moment. And it was a very plain stone, which had been replaced because the original one was now on the wall and very, very faint as to, there it just says Isaac Gulliver. I'm not sure if it said smuggler or not, but it certainly said that. But that was in the floor at one point, but got moved up. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Supposedly they moved it because his body exploded. All the gases came free, so they had to. So that's what they said once.
Yes, many rumours. Yeah. But I think it was, what I heard, it was getting quite worn out on the ground, wasn't it? And so, as now, someone that people like to feel proud of around here as one of their own, that he's now, on the wall without risk of further wear and tear on his stone. But yeah, you're right, it's very plain, isn't it? I think from what, yeah, it's very plain.
Is the house still standing at Kinson where they lived?
No, no. So apparently, apparently, I think it was sort of knocked down in something like the 50s or something like that. It was going to be a road, or it was going to be a roundabout, and so the council knocked it down, and nothing's really ever been built on it again, or there's sort of a bit of a block of flats nearby, is what I've heard. Which, I mean, and you think, how amazing would it be to have that house? The National Trust would be all over that house now. It just sounds incredible.
Do you know how far up the Jurassic Coast the smuggling actually went? You know, to places like Hell Lane at Simonsbury. That seems like the perfect location. Or would that have been somebody else's patch?
I think he had. I think his patch was pretty wide along the Dorset coast into Devon. You know, I think he went round to Teignmouth and then across into Hampshire. But I guess they had their patches, and I think in you know, we say a lot about this. He never killed a man and all that. And of course, in Devon and Hampshire, they were a lot more brutal. There was a lot more killing and murder going on, but there really wasn't here under his patch. So it wasn't like it wasn't how it was done. It was very much his way.
Does anyone actually know what his total wealth was?
I think there is a will that you can see. I mean, he really did own a huge amount of property and a lot of wealth. And another thing that, again, that's like, well, where do I stop and start this performance is then talking about his grandchildren and through his daughters. Then, you know, they both married bankers, and then they got in to start. One of them started the bank that then, over time, has now become the NatWest. So all of that wealth was circulating around and having a big impact on the area, and a legacy still today, really. So you could probably do some more digging, but it was huge. It was really huge. Yeah.
Is the pub still around, or around the one that they lived in?
It's a house, apparently. Yeah, it's a house around. Yeah, at Thorney Down.
Sorry?
Yeah, apparently the house is still there at Thorney Down. It's a private residence. And I heard, you know, one of my main sources was Malcolm Angel. I don't know if you know him, and he's written that really great book about Gulliver. And I went and had a nice chat with him, and he told me, probably asked him the same sort of question, and he said that the owner, hopefully I don't know if they're here, but they haven't done the house up too much, so it still has got quite a lot of its nice original features. Yeah, perhaps it's still got that window through.
I was just going to say that the reason he probably came back and no one noticed was because of all the wealth in the area anyway. So
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning.
Because when he came back from Devon and no one seemed to care, was probably because of the wealth that he generated around the area anyway. I'd be quite happy to see him come back. It wouldn't have bothered me. And then I just wonder, are there any Gullivers in the building? Are there anybody still living locally that are honest enough to admit that? Are you a Gulliver?
Well, I guess home is... Is there one? Oh.
So how much do you know about your family?
I know we're deep-rooted around here. My granddad actually did a family tree, trying to get back to maybe Isaac Gulliver. I don't think he managed it until he passed away, but I have from about 1847 or 1852 he's gone back to. So yeah, no, got family still living in Salisbury and around, and yeah, no, I spent many fun times up at Woodyates. My grandparents ran the farm there, the Gullivers. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that as well. Like, home is home, and this is his network. This is, you know, you get your runnings, don't you? Your area, you know who's who, where to go. You know the routes and the alleyways and all of that. Perhaps that's who knows what brings you home in the end. But yeah,
It's funny. I grew up in Bear Cross, which is down the road from Kinson. So I somehow, and then I lived in Wimborne, so I've kept fairly close to my roots, even though I didn't really know too much. I didn't really realise he moved to Wimborne, but I did know Kinson was a holding place for him, and yeah, no, it's interesting.
How much? So you're obviously doing it from the perspective of his wife. So how much? And all of our questions are about him. How much information is there actually about what her experience was, and how much did you have to kind of make, kind of guesswork or make it up?
There's very, very little known about her. There's her, her birth, marriage, death certificates. There's one image of her. There's a pair of sort of miniature portraits of Elizabeth and Isaac, and that's the only image of her. So that's this bonnet that I was wearing with the sort of sticking out bit at the top. It's kind of hinting to that one portrait. So there's very, very little written about her. So it's really a lot of conjecture. And then there's a lot of choice there. So then, how did women live in the time? She's very interesting because she's an innkeeper's daughter, but then she becomes a very wealthy woman, and a massively entrepreneurial husband. So yeah, the rest is kind of conjecture, trying to fit that in with the time and women's lives. And how would you feel? What would you be doing if you were married to him? How much would you know? All those kinds of things. Yeah.
Do you know where those portraits are?
I don't actually, no. But they were commissioned by a royal portraiture artist. So the same artist that was painting royalty was painting the Gullivers. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned about how would she have been. I've heard the story about the stepping over the barrel and hiding it, when the revenue came. So you'd like to think she was a fairly feisty and determined lady, and she was very protective of her husband.
Mm. And I think that's one of those. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a legend, isn't it? That one. There's sort of certain facts like the raid when they went down to Blandford. That's true. There are documents that say that is how much was taken and that did happen. But this is a legend, the one about the coffin and the barrel of brandy. That's what's built up out of his notoriety.
I like the formality, Sarah, that you put in with sort of all the way through, naming the different smuggled items. How did you come to decide to use that as a kind of linking device and a new chapter almost, wasn't it, each one?
Yeah, well, you've got a big long life here. A lot happens. So what my creative choices are, what am I going to do? I'm going to go from beginning to end. That's quite a lot. How am I going to sort of link it all together? Where do I start? Which bit do I pick up? So I didn't write it in that order. I had some of, I was doing research bits and I thought, what can I associate with each one? And I quite like the thing about the tobacco being associated with Isaac and the sort of tea and the domestic settings and that. So from what I found, I just did these bits. So I wrote it in sections and cut up the sections and decided what sort of order they'd go in and moved them around several times. So it helped me to write it, but not to get bogged down in all the threading of the chronology. Mm.